Tonight, U.S. military forces preparing to up the ante. White House says ground troops may be used to help rescue thousands of Iraqi refugees trapped on that mountain. Well, tonight, military analyst Mike Lyons back on the show to discuss what this move could mean for the U.S. and the rest of the globe. Plus, the Clintons preparing to join the Obamas tonight for a private party on Martha's Vineyard. I would love to be a fly on the wall of this one. Hillary and the president here, are they kissing and making up after Secretary Clinton blasted the president's foreign policy? Did she really slam him, or was it all media hype? We'll discuss that. And we'll also head out to Missouri, where a federal investigation is underway into that police-related shooting for an unarmed teenager. Police are still remaining tight-lipped over which officer pulled the trigger. Does the public have a right to know, or will this create a safety issue? Tonight, our legal panel will weigh in. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we begin in northern Iraq, where a U.S. military team is now stationed while the White House weighs options for a potential rescue mission. This as up to 30,000 Iraqi refugees remain stranded on top of Mount Sinjar after being forced out of their homes by Islamic militants. The U.S. has airdropped food and water to the refugees who cannot sustain themselves on the mountain. However, authorities say they are in dire need of help and are unlikely to survive the treacherous conditions. White House says President Obama is set to make an announcement within days about whether U.S. troops will be sent in to rescue the refugees. U.S. allies are also announcing efforts to assist with the crisis.
We have a very specific objective with respect to the humanitarian situation. That is to get food, water, and emergency supplies to the population on this mountain, and also, as necessary, to take airstrikes against ISIL as they threaten the people on that mountain.
There are detailed plans now being drawn up. Britain will play a role, just as we played a role with British planes and British aid, helping to keep these people alive in a really desperate situation.
Now, the U.S. says it may also arrange a rescue mission with Kurdish forces. Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes says the president, he is considering several rescue options, including airlifts and creating a safe passage for the refugees down that mountain. And if you want to know where the public stands on this, there's a new poll out from Huffington Post and YouGov, and it shows that 58% of Americans support U.S. airstrikes in Iraq, while 24% oppose those. And 15% support sending in U.S. troops, while an overwhelming majority is opposed to the idea. All right, let's bring in our panel. Dominic Carter, of course, here, Andrew Whitman, and Mike Lyons. Mike, as you remember, a former Army captain who served in Iraq. Mike is also a military analyst with CBS News Radio and a senior fellow at the Truman National Security Project. He's kind enough to join us again. All right, first off, can you have a specific and narrowly defined mission, or invariably does this thing always turn into something other than what it was intended?
No, I think he's done a very good job narrowly defining the mission. It's not even mission creep, it's not even mission seep. I mean, you have a very specific mission of getting these refugees off that mountaintop. Can be done with the current power of the U.S. military and the armed forces right now. You have a defensive organization operation that protects them, and then you have another one that takes them off the mountain. They're not looking to engage ISIS now. Should ISIS decide that they're going to engage U.S. forces, they'll fire back, of course. But it's likely going to take troops on the ground. At this point, only U.S. forces would be involved, because it'll be very complicated to gather other nations, other armies, to send communications, all of those kinds of things. So rapid deployment force makes sense. I think the president's done a very good job now defining and putting this balloon out for what could potentially be a very good mission.
So explain to the audience, in layman terms, Mike, what this thing would look like. Is it that the air power would basically clear a path here, and then the ground troops, and then the ground forces, I should say, go in and bring the necessary aid to get these people down the mountain? How would it work?
Well, the first thing you'd have to do is get ground troops there. They'd have to get there at some point, a safe passage as well. Could be an airborne operation, could be an air drop, and then they get to the mountain. They get troops on top of the mountain as well to start organizing these refugees and likely triaging them. There's some that still will likely have to be airlifted out. So this is not just going to be everyone's going down the mountain. Some will still have to be airlifted out, but then for the majority of them, they'll look for that safe passage. They'll look for a way to go. Now, if you look at a map right now, it looks like down the side of this mountain, across an open swath of desert, however, into Syria. Into Syria is the least possible resistance right now. head north, and then back into the Kurdistan region. I don't think U.S. forces would necessarily have that responsibility for the escort through Syria, but I wouldn't be surprised to see those U.S. forces provide this cordon in front of them and around that mountain to protect those refugees.
We talk about this as an acronym, ISIS, ISIL. To you, is their MO that they probably engage us here? Is this thing got a better than average chance of getting messy?
This will determine for them how strong they really are. And they've picked and chosen their battles when they know they could win. And at this point in time, should they decide to engage U.S. forces, they're going to lose a lot of men and they're going to lose a lot of equipment. They'd have to, first of all, marshal them to this area, of which they'd come from a great distance. They would kick up a lot of dust and dirt. We would see them coming from miles and miles away. And again, there you have U.S. air power, both from the skies, from 20,000 feet from a strategic perspective, and you'll have Black Hawk helicopters, you'll have gunships, you'll have all kinds of support for our troops on the ground. Very clearly will do anything to protect both our forces and those refugees.
Is it just lip service, or is there substance and significance that you saw Cameron, you saw some of the allies, you even see the Kurds talking that they're going to help a role here? Is it important that we're not doing this thing alone?
I think for the rest of the world's perspective it is, and I think that as it starts, they'll have some role in the operation. But again, from a straight operational perspective, they're going to be very concerned about clear, crisp communications, radio frequencies, all those kinds of things. Everyone's got to be on the same page. So if the British, for example, are given a mission, they might be given a certain area to protect and defend. They might be responsible for supplies to that specific area. But to see them, everybody tied in at this point, should this mission go, would be very difficult.
I'm just concerned about the style of warfare that ISIS would engage in. They've been in more conventional formats as they've rolled across Syria and into Iraq, but a lot of these are the remnants of Saddam Hussein loyalists who we bought off in the surge in 2009, 2010. These are the people who are using roadside bombs and unconventional forms of war. Are we prepared for that if that's the resistance that we get from ISIS?
Well, Andrew, I think the key element here, the secondary mission of the U.S. forces is to keep ISIS well separated from these refugees. And that's because should they get involved and mixed up in them, now they could get in there and then become insurgents amongst these refugees. Then they're moving with the pack, they could create a problem. So as long as we can create this boundary, and we've done it by the air, if we can create this boundary, this separation between these two main groups and areas, this mission has a chance to succeed.
We're going to talk next segment, Mike, because there's been the back and forth, the Hillary interview that she conducted and everything. One of the things beyond the politics that we'll get into is some people said timeout. Somebody who authorized the use of force to go into Iraq back when, to now criticize where we are right now. Is it a lot harder being the guy who's got to actually make the call than the one sitting on the sidelines lobbying it? I mean, whoever sits in the White House in that Oval Office next, and even after that, there's no more nation states fighting. I'm not telling you something you haven't forgotten. You forgot more than I have on this, but it just seems so hard to figure out what's the line. The lines keep seeming to move, and the players and the actors keep seeming to move, and the agendas are as well. What's the most important thing for the next president when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to a policy or even defining what the mission is there?
Yeah, I mean, all of these countries in that region have their own interests at heart, and they have something that's important to them. That's number one. But number two, I think the strategy's got to continue to be, we can't let one power, one group, one country, any one force have so much power in that region that they take control of the oil, that they influence and they cast a shadow over everything that happens there, regardless of the regimes that they're, regardless of that happens. Unfortunately, that tipped once Saddam was taken out of power and that regime changed. We miscalculated tremendously on how that was going to go. Iran now became the great power of the region, and now ISIS is rising as a power. So it would be in our best interest. Our strategy is to get all of these countries in that region on the same plane and not having one be a great power.
Is that possible?
It existed in a manner before that we weren't happy with. I mean, you have a Saddam Hussein in power who's a dictator, ruthless, but again, he kept everything together, so to speak. It probably wasn't going to last long. His sons would have come and likely tried to take over certain things, but from a strategy perspective, I think it has to be worked. I think that's got to be the objective. It keeps diplomacy out front. It keeps all those things somewhat tied together if you can.
We're going to be talking about the politics next time, but Mike, as always, thank you so much. All right, when we come back, we'll get into that, but as always, sound off yourself here and head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on a question tonight here. Should the U.S. send in those ground troops to Iraq, even in the limited capacity as Mike just defined? When we come back, are Hillary Clinton and President Obama playing nice? They'll be at the same event at Martha's Vineyard tonight here. First time they will have met face-to-face since Hillary slammed the president's policy on Syria. She says her comments taken out of context. What do you think? We'll talk the politics and the policy of it after this.